Right.
All right, everyone, we're live. Good afternoon. My name is Brent Worth, and I am the president and CEO at Easterseals MORC. Some of you may have known us as Easterseals Michigan, and some of you have known us as MORC. But last year we merged to become one, in my biased opinion, one spectacular organization, Easterseals MORC. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the See the Good webinar. March is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. All month long, you get to let people know and encourage others to see the good. We've been doing it through our social media. We want to raise awareness of the many talents, contributions, successes, you name it, of those with disabilities and our seniors. Today, you're going to hear from a really diverse expert panel. I just got a chance to speak to them. I didn't know I was live, so some of you may have heard that conversation, but you get to hear more from them and not from me. So that is what today is about. It's about the panel. It's about, we have a variety of experts, and you get to hear about their experience, as well as giving you better opportunities and better ways to help us all see the good. It is my pleasure to introduce Lindsay Calcaterra, our Vice President of Communications, who is our moderator. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Brent, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. Before we begin, I just want to take a minute to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and Blue Cross Complete for their partnership in today's event. We appreciate your support and participation in raising awareness of the See the Good campaign. Also, just a reminder, if you haven't already, if you could please remember to mute yourself just to help us reduce background noise during the webinar. We would also like today's event to be engaging. So if you have questions or comments as we go along, feel free to type them in the chat, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can, time permitting. With that, it's my pleasure to now introduce our amazing panel who will be joining me for today's discussion. They are Dr. Doru Bali, Medical Director at Easterseals MORC, Hannah Richey, owner of Hannah Joy Spectrum Designs, Matt Fritzen, a peer mentor and disability advocate, Kelly Helmreich, a nurse and intake support coordinator for the Easterseals MORC Senior Program, and Katie Kogelmann, who is the parent of a child with a disability. Welcome, panel. Matt, I'm going to start with you. You've been a longtime advocate for individuals with disabilities as well as a peer mentor. Can you tell us a little bit about what a peer mentor does, and how does what you do help other people with disabilities be successful?
Sure. Well, basically what I do is I go into individuals' homes that are receiving services with more, and I work on different goals that they have. Some of those goals might be social skill, maybe they need help with money. We do a wide variety of skill sets with them. This is after the support coordinator said that they need those skills to be improved. And we really hone in with them by working with them on a one-on-one basis, usually once a month, maybe twice a month, depending on what their IPOS says. And we really take the time to make sure that they understand what they need to do to get those skills better. And I've been doing this for about 10 years now, and I really enjoy it.
Great. And how does having a peer mentor differ a little bit from having a support coordinator? How do you help them in a little bit more personal way?
Because we use our lived experiences. So I will use, in some cases, when I can, I use my lived experiences, like, hey, I tried it this way myself. It might work for you. You may want to think about trying it this way versus just jumping in the deep end and not having any idea of which way you want to do something. You actually have somebody you can bounce ideas off of before you actually do something. And I found that individuals will talk to myself quicker than sometimes support coordinators, because they know that we can relate to them, because we've been there, we've been through it. And sometimes with individuals, they feel like they don't know what they're talking about. They're just the support coordinators. They don't understand us. So when they have somebody who can understand them, they open up to you a little bit faster. And I found sometimes too that they even open up faster to me and better to me than their own caregivers that they have at times.
Yeah, so
So,
having that lived experience is really, really, I think, the key piece there. That is
yeah.
wonderful. Thank you. Hannah, you run your own business called Hannah Joy Spectrum Designs. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with your business?
So I originally started making stuff just to reduce anxiety, not originally to start a business, and then started going to a local art studio to reduce anxiety. And then I started just making stuff to reduce anxiety and making it for my mom, and people started asking if they could buy my product, and that's kind of how we got started.
And you really were able to use social media a lot
Oh, yeah.
and growing your business. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
So yeah, social media has really helped, like, not just with the business part, but like the story about my business. Like my mom says this all the time, my business on social media, like, I mean, my stuff sells with my business, obviously, but with just but when they hear your story, they feel inspired, and yeah.
That's great. And what is having a business? You said how you talked a little bit about how it has helped with your anxiety. Have you been able to learn some other skills by having your own business? How has that helped you?
Well, math is not my strong suit, so that has been a huge thing I've had to learn, like making change and deciding how much to price certain things at. So yeah, math, that's been a huge learning curve, but it's really helped me. This business has helped me learn more about my math skills, I guess.
Great. And I bet marketing too, because you're such a whiz with promoting on social media and in the stores. So yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you. Dr. Bali, I'd like to look at the medical environment for a minute. I know I've heard a lot from individuals with disabilities that one place in particular that they tend to not feel fully seen and heard is medical settings, places like doctor's offices, dentist offices, hospitals. How do you think seeing the good create a more inclusive and higher quality experience for those with disabilities accessing the healthcare system?
So I think it's important to bring inclusivity to the medical arena as well. There is still some sort of ignorance in the medical world, so to speak, from an educational perspective. Topics like these are not part of like the regular curriculum in medical schools, nursing schools, right? And programs like that. And it's taking off, right? There's certain schools that are doing it better than others, but they are not all on the same page. So I think that education is critical for this, and exposure to how the system works and different kinds of people with different abilities, right? That just that exposure in itself, I think, is going to create a lot of inclusivity in itself, and also just bring more attention to this very important topic.
Yeah, we know that 1 in 4 individuals in the U.S. have a disability. It's about 26%. So we're going to be seeing these individuals frequently in the healthcare settings. Can you talk about the importance of how having a good experience and being fully seen helps establish trust? We talked about how trust is so critical to having a high quality experience.
Absolutely. And then trust is either, at least in my experience, it can be made or broken in like the first minute, right, of that encounter. So if the first encounter is not a positive one, obviously the individual is going to be much less likely rather to seek medical advice or attention or anything like that. So a positive experience is a must. And I think that once that trust is being built, it's going to create more of a relationship where it's going to be beneficial for both the provider as well as the patient, right? So I cannot overemphasize that trust and how building that important, part of the interaction is so important for not just now, but also for the future, right? For the medical care provision.
Right. So that first encounter, I think, is really important in making sure that someone is feeling fully seen and heard during that first encounter, and how that translates to, better outcomes, a higher quality experience. Thank you.
Correct.
Katie, I'd like to bring in the parent perspective for a minute. So your son Brody has Down syndrome. Today is actually National or World Down Syndrome Awareness Day. So when we talk about things like an awareness day, what does that mean to you and your family, and what type of awareness do you think is most needed?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. And you're right, today is World Down Syndrome Day, which is super exciting. So just to give you a little information, it's 321. So a third copy of the 21st chromosome is why it's today. And I had the opportunity to actually have Brody the day before World Down Syndrome. So we were actually in the hospital and found out about this day. And so to Dr. Bali's point, at that time, from the medical perspective, in the hospital, learning a lot of like what he might not be able to do, that, it was really important to be able to look at your child and be able to look at them for who they are as the person. So kind of that person first, what will Brody be able to do? What will his likes and dislikes be? And just really seeing someone as an individual.
Yeah, I know we've often talked about there's a lot of stereotypes too around individuals with Down syndrome. And can you talk about some of those and how we can, do better about busting some of those stereotypes?
Yeah, sometimes, I think when people hear that your child has Down syndrome, oh my gosh, is he always happy? Well, yeah, he's happy a lot, but he also gets sad and he gets mad and he is tired some days, and, all the range of emotions as everyone else. So, but I think there is that idea of like that they're always happy no matter what. And then maybe that one emotion is one of the stigmas that comes around. Also at one point, I remember going to get his picture taken as a baby, and they said, oh, all the kids with Down syndrome have a hard time kind of looking at the camera. And I thought at that point, because at that point he was just my baby, Brody, I thought, wow, that's the first time someone's acknowledged he has Down syndrome. Like, oh my gosh, he does. Yeah, but he was just Brody to me. So it's just some of those, or other times that people generalize, like all the kids with Down syndrome go to this school building, or they do, those kind of things. And then I just kind of take that opportunity to educate that individuality and that curiosity. Sometimes kids just are curious and ask questions. So I just try to take those opportunities to advocate and educate on children with Down syndrome and how they can be very different or just like you. So.
Yeah, I think really the idea of, it's a person first. A person is not their diagnosis, and always, going to, and it's with a lot of things too, not just Down syndrome, but just making sure that we're, referring to him as a person and not someone with Down syndrome. Everybody with Down syndrome has that, So I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kelly, I want to shift gears a little bit and bring in Kelly Helmreich. There's a lot of similarities between individuals with disabilities and senior citizens in discussing some of these themes around seeing the good. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about your work with our senior program, and what are some of the ways that we can better see the good for our seniors?
Hi, thank you for having me. So I guess to begin, I'd like to say that we're never going to lead people to our mission if we don't talk about what we do and why we do it. So the program I'm representing is the My Choice Waiver program. It's a program that helps seniors remain in their home, or if they're in a nursing home and want to go home, we help facilitate that. And sometimes we have to remember that home is going to take on a new look for the individual. Home might not be their physical home that they came from, but we're still going to make it their home. It's important to remember that no matter what reason an individual needs care, they're not the diagnosis, and we're not going to have them live within the constraints of a diagnosis. So we meet the individual where they're at in their journey. We walk alongside of them to facilitate a smooth transition or enrollment into our program. We help the family find care, or the individual find care in the least restrictive environment possible. So we're accomplishing this through networking and advocacy. We're not only working with families and the participants, but also nursing homes, community organizations, vendors, elder care attorneys, insurance agencies, and other various referral sources. So it's important for the seniors to remember that everybody has a story. Their life is a story. It's what's brought them to this point in their life. It's what's made them unique. And so we try and take that and help them find a housing situation or caregiver situations that are going to best facilitate their individual uniqueness in a safe environment. It allows them to be who they are and continue to live their life. I always say that every family is a new journey, and it's our mission to walk alongside them and find out how we can help them get to where it is they're going. I think for the seniors, just encouraging them to maintain their life and maintain their story. Whether we relate to it or not, it's their story, it's how they're living their life, and it's imperative to just support that individuality. So.
Yeah, I think with seniors, I think the point that Matt brought up earlier about their experience, I think, with seniors have so much lived experience and so much wisdom that should really be cherished and honored. And that's one of the best ways we can see the good with our seniors is like you said, honoring their story and taking advantage of that great wisdom and lived experience. And also, as you mentioned, helping them live, maintain their independence and dignity for as long as possible with the types of resources that we have. So now that we've heard a little bit about everybody's background, I'd like to engage the panel in discussing some specific tips and advice for how we can all do a better job of seeing the good in all aspects of our community life. So Matt, I'm going to go back to you. If you could share some key pieces of advice to see the good for those with developmental disabilities, what would it be?
Sure. Always, assume competency. Meaning, don't think that they can't do something just because they have a disability, because that's so important. Because I always get like, oh, yes, they can't do that because they have a wheelchair, and I'm like, what do you mean? I can do that, But if you want to help somebody, please ask them before you do it, because if you don't, you're taking away that dignity from them. Even if it's just opening up a door, ask them, hey, do you want me to help you with that? Instead of just doing it, especially if you see them struggling, let them struggle a little bit. Maybe they want to struggle to get that door open, and then ask them, hey, can I help you with that door? Also, remember, if the person's in a wheelchair like myself, please remember the wheelchairs, think of the wheelchair as a part of the body. So don't be leaning up against the wheelchair. Hey, buddy, how you doing today? Because sometimes that's really frustrating. It's a part of it's a motorized scooter, yes, or chair, yes, but it's also the way that we get around. Like our legs to you guys would get you around. So, and also treat everybody with dignity and respect. That is huge. I don't know if anybody saw me on TV, but I plead for you guys to treat everybody with dignity and respect. And I don't care if that's seniors, I don't care if that's a kid, a person with disability. Everybody should be treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah, so many great points there, Matt. Thank you so much. I think, I think see the good begins with being seen, right? And making sure that, you're seeing somebody as a person first and treating them with dignity, making eye contact, talking to the person. I think what you said about the equipment is a really good point too, because it's not just wheelchairs, it's any type of assistive equipment that somebody with a disability may be using, and making sure that there's respect for that. And people shouldn't just, assume to start wheeling you around, right, without asking you first, or leaning on your chair like it's a piece of furniture. It's part of, what you use to function. So I think that's
one other thing, Lindsay, if you're out in the community with somebody, you see somebody with a developmental disability, please talk to them before you go to the caregiver and ask a question. That's really annoying, and that has happened to me, and it really made me upset. So please, 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 if you're out in the community and you're at a restaurant or wherever you may be, and you need to ask that person, hey, do you want another Coke or whatever, you talk to them before you talk to the caregiver. Can Johnny have a Coke? Kind of thing, because that's just really just ignoring them, and that's not cool.
Yeah, great points. Thank you, Matt. Hannah, when it comes to the business world, so we know that the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that only 21% of Americans with disabilities are in the workforce currently or actively seeking work. So we know it's an area that we really need to work on, and we need to get more individuals with disabilities working, and we need to have more businesses hiring them. So what advice would you give to businesses, to help us with this issue?
Just to take a chance on any individual with a disability, and because if you think you might have to make some accommodations, but if you think about it, my boss, for example, is very accommodating. Not only that, but and understanding, and they can be, a lot of people with special needs are they're just like anyone else. You don't need to label them or not hire them because they have special needs.
Right. So in addition to owning your own business, you also work in a library, right?
Yeah.
And that's been really successful for you, hasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And can you talk about some of the things? So we mentioned that, sometimes, a business might have to make, some slight changes or some accommodations for the person to be successful in the job. And with the library, can you talk about some of the things and how you've worked with the library to make that more successful for you?
Here's one example, because shortly after I started, I was doing the closing shift, and in my mind, I thought I was because at 8:45 the lights are supposed to go off, so I would start trying to turn off the lights, and people would still be doing their thing, and I kind of start staring at them without thinking. And then my boss said, how about you come until 8:30, so then that way you're still successful but you're not anxious.
Right. So just one small little accommodation and changing the time, was able to help you with your anxiety and make that more successful.
Yeah, and now I'm doing closing shifts again. So, and I've been there for 5 years. Yeah,
and you've gotten several promotions, and haven't you? Yep. Great job. Great points on, just taking a chance. And, so many individuals with disabilities have such great, unique talents and skills. And really, it's just finding the right match, using that skill in the right job. So thank you for your examples.
Yep.
Dr. Bali, what are some of the best ways that you think medical professionals can better support individuals with disabilities in the healthcare settings?
I think similar to what Matt was alluding to, right? You got to speak to the individual first. Do not assume that they're not able to speak on their own behalf, right? Don't speak to their caregivers. Don't speak to their guardian or whoever else is in the room as well. You got to speak to them and let them make a decision at that time. So just being all inclusive from the very first step or the very first conversation that you do with the individual, I think is very important. And I think it's just a matter, again, just striking up the conversation and see where the individual is coming from, right? Because they may have a completely diverse background that you may not be aware of, potentially, and I'm talking about possible abuse, possible other issues in the past that make them even less inclined to seek medical attention. But I think it's just being aware of those possible issues and from the very beginning is very important. speak to them at an eye level if they're in a wheelchair, depending on what their physical disability is, if any, because not all of them have physical disabilities and some of them just have intellectual disabilities. And and not necessarily be touchy, right? Because you never know, like some individuals don't like that. So just trying to, from the beginning, to kind of be careful about some of those assumptions is very important.
Yeah, and can you talk about sometimes individuals with disabilities may communicate differently and how that translates when it comes to maybe being able to express pain or other things that are going on medically? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So some individuals, right, when they have pain, they are more active, more agitated, especially the nonverbal individuals that cannot voice their concerns or pain. But it's the other ones that I'm concerned about. It's the ones that become quiet, right? The quiet ones, that, so to speak. And then those are the ones that, at least in my medical experience, those are the sickest ones oftentimes, right? And it's like, okay, so where's the pain coming from? What is going on, especially for someone that cannot voice their needs and opinions.
Looks like if somebody please mute.
It's MJ. Yeah.
There we go. All right, got it. Okay.
Sorry,
Dr. Bali. Continue.
It's okay. So it's either that they are overly agitated or overly verbal, right? To a point where they can become like it's more of a psychiatric issue or psychiatric emergency when it's actually a medical emergency. And then on the other side is obviously when they become very quiet, you also have to be concerned about other medical emergencies as well.
Right. So understanding what some of those different ways are and some of those cues, could be very helpful, for
Correct.
doctors in diagnosing and being able to, provide the right care plan for individuals. Yep. Great. Thank you. Katie, what advice on seeing the good would you like to give people when they interact with children like your son, Brody?
Well, I think to Matt's point, just, to give another example, I think the importance of asking the individual instead of asking caregiver is huge. Just when we're in a restaurant, a lot of times they'll look to me and say, what does he want? And I always just kind of redirect to him, bro, tell him what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it's always a cheeseburger. That's his thing at every restaurant pretty much. So
Mm-hmm.
if we've been there a few times, they already know, they don't even need to ask him. But so I think it's just important to make sure you're asking that individual. And the other thing is to ask questions. Kids are so good at this. Like if we're on the playground, they don't understand something he says, they'll say, well, why isn't he talking, or what? He's in 5th grade, ask a lot of questions. And I just, we just answer them. We talk about them, and Brody sometimes will answer them. But I think sometimes adults and sometimes kids too will just kind of do that, like staring, but they don't really ask the question, which gets a little uncomfortable. And usually, if I'm around and I see that, I'll say, did you have a question? Because, it's okay to ask if you'd like. But I think it's just good to know that if you have questions about someone, it's okay to ask them versus, just kind of stand there and not talk to them or kind of ignore them as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because I think that's a situation a lot of people find themselves in. Like they may be curious and have a question, but they may feel awkward or uncomfortable to ask. And so from your perspective, you would rather they ask so that they have the awareness instead of maybe making an assumption or maybe having the wrong idea. Is that right? Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody may feel differently. That's in my situation. That's how I feel about it. But some people may not feel comfortable with that either. So.
Yeah. Thank you. Kelly, in your experience, what tips or advice do you have to help community members better support our seniors?
So I think the biggest thing is just raising more awareness and creating those open dialogues between families and caregivers, families and, their primary care doctors, families and, if they're in a nursing home, just so they can feel free to ask the questions, to know that there are choices for care. There's choices, where they get their care. They're not, there's not an end place. If they have a desire to go to another type of living facility, just to let them know that is available. I think there's little known that there is an option. I think people have the assumption, and we talk about assumptions and not making assumptions, but I think people think that, end of the life is the nursing home, and that's not the case. So really getting the education out there in the community that, there are options available for individuals to receive care. And then just as caregivers, just always building that knowledge, knowledge is power. Once you know something, you're smarter for it. So even if you can apply it to one person, you've helped one person. So, never stop learning, never stop asking those questions.
Yeah, we also talked about what are some tangible things that people can do, like maybe volunteering, things like that, to help with seniors.
Right. And that's another good thing, volunteering. So, people can get involved with their local, every community has a senior center, that it's an excellent way to volunteer, because a lot of times that's the first place somebody will call if they need something, is they're going to call their community center, their local senior center, and ask, whether it be for someone to come sit with them or a ride someplace, modifications on their home. It's a good resource. If you have those skills, you can offer them up. Another way is, through fundraising efforts. I mean, it goes without saying the work we do is funded in different ways, and one of them is fundraising, and volunteering to help out with fundraisings through different means is, an excellent way, because volunteers fill a lot of positions in fundraising. And then, different religious organizations also have lists within their organization that, they can make meals, they can offer rides, they sometimes will go sit with individuals. So there's lots of different avenues to volunteer. If that's something that you feel is your calling, I definitely reach out to your local, community centers, religious organizations, or search out fundraisers for areas that you're interested in and volunteer for those.
Yeah, we've also talked about just raising more awareness of the resources that are available for seniors. I know, like every week, I get, multiple emails from people who are in the situation of having an aging parent, and, they don't want them to go to a nursing home, or they don't, but, they're not aware of the resources that are available, maybe to keep them in their own home, or to, manage some of these needs in a more dignified way. So I think just raising the awareness of that is super important.
Right.
Okay. Well, I do want to encourage if anybody has, questions, to put them in the chat for our panelists so far. So I don't see any. Please go ahead and type in anything that you'd like to ask our panel. And while we're waiting for questions, we'll kind of move on to the next section here. So at Easterseals MORC, we're really proud of our long history of being trailblazers and increasing access, inclusiveness, and independence for individuals with disabilities and seniors. And as we look towards the future, where do we go from here? And what are some of the key areas that we still need to work on in making our community more inclusive for individuals with disabilities and seniors? So I'm just going to go back around to the panel. And if you have any thoughts on this question, Matt, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think we need to keep, I don't want to say fighting back, but keep an eye on what the state government's doing, and making sure that we are, when we see something that's not productive to our community, that we say something back to the officials and say, hey, look, this is not cool. This is not going to work. We need to stop this. I know I did a few years back, last year, I think it was, with two of the bills that was trying to privatize the Medicaid dollars for the mental health system. I was like, no. I called my representatives multiple times and said, this is not cool. I also called this governor's office and told them, no, this is not cool. So I made sure that my name was out there so they knew I was not a fan of this, and luckily it didn't go. So I think my advocacy worked right there. But yeah, I definitely would say we need to work on the advocacy and just really keep that up for everybody.
So being
Because-
vigilant on what's going on, you know, in the government and in the legislature, you know, as far as maybe legislation that could affect people's lives, and making sure that, like you said, if it's not something that the community thinks is going to be beneficial, to make sure that they're standing up for that and making their voice heard.
Yeah, and I also see a chat message, and I kind of want to ping into this because it's a good one.
Okay.
Affordable housing and apartments, you know, we need to keep an eye out for those listings that, you know, could be really beneficial to a lot of people, because people with disabilities or anybody that's like low income cannot afford these apartments nowadays, because they want so much money for these apartments. And I know myself included that, you know, $500 just for an apartment when there's a 2-bedroom apartment, it's kind of crazy, you know. And plus, on top of all the bills that you have on top of that, like the gas, the heat, the water, the sewer, you know, all that other stuff, it adds up quick.
Yeah.
And I think affordable housing would be a good thing to kind of keep an eye out, because a lot of times the lists open up and you don't know what's open.
Right. So I think, yeah, I think there's definitely a lack of affordable housing when it comes to individuals with disabilities, and we definitely need to advocate more for that. I also want to give Kelly, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this question too, because I think they're asking, are there affordable apartments in the community as opposed to nursing homes, age specific?
Yeah, absolutely. We have contracts with different vendors through the different counties that we serve. Are there enough? No, we could always use more, but do we have options? We do. And that's what we do. We link people with an apartment setting or a home setting that meets their needs. You know, so we do, they are affordable. We have, I mean, an affordability comes across a whole span. So the individuals that we serve are Medicaid recipients, so their income falls in that bracket. So yeah, they are affordable as far as that goes. They have care, and they come with different apartments have different associated care levels that they can accommodate. So we just match people with where they, one, want to live, and two, that will meet their needs.
Right. So there are a variety of options that can, you know, be in lieu of going to a nursing home that people can explore based on their particular situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Matt, you mentioned the acronym IPOS. Can you just say what that is real quick?
Sure. It's individual plan of service.
Right.
Sorry,
So that's
I should have said it when I was talking about it. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. And that's the plan that, you know, maybe a support coordinator can help develop with the person and their family that goes through what are their goals, and then what supports might they need to help them reach those goals, and that would all be in the plan of service. Here's another question: how should people go about when they visit businesses that aren't inclusive? Who would like to take that? Matt or Hannah? Matt, go ahead. You're on mute.
Okay, sorry about that. Sure, I think the person should, you know, like myself, I will say something about it. So like if there's something wrong with the bathroom because it's not handicap accessible, I talked to the manager about it, like, what's up with this? You know, the bathroom's really hard to get into. I'm in a wheelchair and I can't even get in there. Do you have a different one? Sometimes they have the other bathrooms that are located in different areas that you might not have access to normally, but if you're in a chair, sometimes they'll take you through a back way or an elevator that went up to a second floor bar. You know, they use it for like food trucks or the food carts that they have going up to the bar. I had that happen So just really ask the place that's not as being as inclusive as it should be. Talk to a manager and, ask them those tough questions, how come there's not a handicap bathroom? Or, and be nice about it. Don't, be mean about it, but just make them think about it and be like, oh, maybe we should consider this next time we build the restaurant or store.
Mhm. So always take an opportunity to show, how we can be a little bit more inclusive, if it's not quite meeting your needs. That's a good
Yes.
one.
Education, yeah.
Right. Hannah, did you want to add anything on that one?
I think public transportation is a big thing too, because like people like me who can't drive or don't have the capability, who get too anxious driving. I think it's important that we also somehow get that public transportation available.
Right. More of it and more accessible. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with you. That's a really good point. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have a business owner who would love to get more involved with those with disabilities. That's great. Yeah, there's lots of opportunities, lots of volunteer opportunities. We'll put our information up at the end of the webinar, and you can contact us for that. So we thank you. Let's go back to our question about where do we go from here? So Hannah, did you want to add anything on that one? What are some of the areas that you think? You mentioned transportation. I think that's a great one. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Just being compassionate and understanding towards people with disabilities, and being patient, because it might take a little bit sometimes for to understand what, depending on the type of disability you have, whether it's what you need, what someone's trying to say or trying to communicate verbally or just emotionally. Just be patient with them, and because people with disabilities are, in my opinion, some of the best workers.
Yeah, I agree. It's a huge untapped pool of talent. So I think going back to your point about just giving a chance, taking a chance. I think most of the time that turns out to be a very good experience. Dr. Bali, what are your thoughts on where do we go from here? What areas do you think we still need to work on?
I think obviously the awareness is huge, and I think that's prime and foremost in the medical world, at least from a provider aspect. Both awareness and education, how the overall system works, right, for those that cannot voice their opinions, and just continue with the education at both like a medical education level as well as even postgraduate level as well. After physicians, nurses, after they've been in the job field for some time, to probably offer some awareness courses as well.
Yeah, do you think making it a part of medical education, is something, because as we mentioned earlier, 1 in 4 people, this is something that's going to come up quite a bit. Making it part of medical education, that awareness piece, and you think that would be helpful?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Katie, what do you think?
I think definitely building that awareness is huge, and also that awareness of how things are not, there isn't equal opportunity in different situations. Just to give an example, any child can choose to do school of choice, but a child that has an IEP has to get permission from that district to actually be able to do school of choice, which is sometimes not a possibility because it comes down to funding. So I just think things like that need to be highlighted, and people need to be aware of where it is not an equal playing field. So,
yeah, can you talk a little bit more about? I think that's the first time we've talked about the education piece. I think that's a really important piece. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think it's just from an early age. I mean, just to give for Brody, for example, he started out in early education, getting supports and looking at trying to keep him in his homeschool. That was kind of a fight to keep him there because it was kind of that automatic. Well, we send all the kids over to this other program, and you know, I had to meet with the director. It was like a whole process, and he did end up being able to stay at his homeschool. He did amazing. He's moving on to middle school next year. But I think it's just that awareness of that there are other possibilities, and you have to look at each person individually, and that they should be given any opportunity as any other student to move forward. So.
Yeah, and I think it's important for parents also to be aware of the resources that are available to them when they're having these conversations with the school, because they have a lot of rights and there's a lot of resources to be able to advocate in the schools. And sometimes, you know, if you don't know that, you know, it doesn't always work out well. So knowing the resources that are available and what your actual rights are, you know, for your child's education, I think that's really important.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there for people, and they just have to know about them and know what they can do and what they can say. And so I think, and sometimes it's even, you know, teachers or administrators aren't really, they're used to doing something a certain way until someone challenges that way. And it's not always just because they are trying to do anything malicious. They just don't really think about other possibilities. So.
Right. And there's resources like mediation, you know, that's free to parents, that, you know, if you're having some struggles with IEP meetings and things like that, and you're not feeling fully heard, you know, there's resources like that can come and be a kind of a neutral voice, you know, that advocates for the individual. They're not on anybody's side. They just want to kind of improve communication. And I think, and again, it's free. So, you know, taking advantage of things like that. And it looks like there's a lot of people on here who agree with you in the content, in the chat about the education piece. So thank you for bringing that up. Kelly, what are your thoughts on going forward?
You know, it just, you know, we keep talking about awareness, and then I think probably one of the biggest things that and our program is the caregiver shortage. You know, it's kind of the wheel to the wagon. Basically, we need caregivers. We need people coming into that field. You know, I think that's going to just come from, you know, networking, advocacy, making people aware of what is a caregiver, who can be a caregiver, and what does a caregiver do. Just, you know, and then, you know, that it's a nationwide shortage. It's not a Michigan shortage. It's not a 6-county shortage. It's a national shortage. You know, it's worked on at all levels, trying to identify what can help, but just, you know, spreading the word that is a career. I mean, it's a viable, people do it for a living, and I think it's underlooked or overlooked sometimes. And I think getting that word back out there that, you know, we need caregivers in all areas, not just nursing homes, but in people's homes and different communities, to do different types of things. So just getting that word out there.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the caregiver crisis. I know that's you know, one of the number one issues right now. You know, people have plans of service, but there's not a caregiver to actually implement the services, so it becomes, you know, a big problem. And I think you're right. I think it's a career that is overlooked and undervalued. And I know there's been a lot of advocacy, you know, in this state and other states, you know, to bring more value to that position, to have it paid, you know, as that position should be paid, and to give it the value that it deserves. But certainly more work still needs to be done, and constant vigilance on that issue, I think, is really important. Thank you. I don't see any additional questions. So I think we're going to move to, do we have some wrap up? Yep, wrap up slides. So we just put together this slide here are some of the really key points that we discussed today at the webinar of how we can all see the good. So again, seeing the good starts with being seen, making sure we always talk directly to a person with a disability or a senior, and not their companion or caregivers. Understanding that not all disabilities are visible. Assuming competence, you know, focusing on what the person can do rather than on what they can't do. Always ask before helping. Remembering that people are not their diagnosis and should not be referred to as their diagnosis. And it's okay to ask about someone's disability. It's also okay if they choose not to talk about it. So these are just some key takeaways, you know, from today's webinar that I think we can all learn a little bit from. And with that, in closing, I want to thank our partner, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and Blue Cross Complete, and our amazing panel and all of you for tuning in. Hopefully you found the information thought-provoking and gained some important tips that will help us look at ability first and inspire us to see the good in everyone. Just as a follow-up note, a recording of this webinar will soon be available on our YouTube channel and accessible on our website. And for additional resources, including community resources, a downloadable activity book, and an etiquette guide, please visit our website at www.eastersealsmorc.org or give us a call at 1-800-75-SEALS. Thank you again for tuning in. We appreciate everybody's support and hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Hi, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Hi,
you, panel.
Katie. Continue again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, have a good one.